Morning. Let's come to order and go on the record, please. I'm Charlotte Mitchell, Chair of the North Carolina Utilities Commission. With me today are Commissioners Kimberly W. Duffley, Floyd B. McKissick Jr., Jeffrey A. Hughes, Karen M. Kimmerite, William M. Brawley, and Tommy Tucker. I now call for hearing docket number G5 sub 667 in the matter of joint application of Public Service Company of North Carolina Incorporated and Enbridge Parrot Holdings LLC to engage in a business combination transaction. Before we proceed further, and as is required by the State Government Ethics Act, I remind members of the Commission of our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and quietness time as to whether any member of the Commission has a known conflict with respect to matter coming before us in this proceeding. All right, the record will reflect that no conflicts have been identified, so we will proceed. On October 20th, 2023, Public Service Company of North Carolina, doing business as Dominion Energy North Carolina, I'll refer to the company as PSNC, and Enbridge Parrot Holdings LLC, or EP Holdings, and together the joint applicants, filed with the Commission a joint application pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Section 62-111A and Commission Rule R1-5 for the approval of a business combination transaction. Filed with the application were a purchase and sale agreement, a cost-benefit analysis, and a market power analysis. The application requests that the Commission authorize a business combination through which, in effect, PSNC, which is currently an indirect subsidiary of Dominion Energy Incorporated, would be sold to EP Holdings, which is an indirect subsidiary of Enbridge US Incorporated. The application explains that, assuming the business combination is approved by the Commission, upon closing of the transaction, PSNC would become an indirect subsidiary of Enbridge US Incorporated. Further, the application explains that PSNC would continue to exist as a separate legal entity, subject to the full jurisdiction of this commission. The application provides that the transaction is in the public interest, satisfies the legal standard established by North Carolina General Statute Section 62-111A, and satisfies the no harm standard established by the Commission when applying Section 62-111A. On November 15th, in support of the application, EP Holdings filed the direct testimony and exhibits of Michelle Herodance, James Sanders, Christopher Johnston, and John Reed. Also, on November 15th, 2023, PSNC filed the direct testimony of D. Russell Harris in support of the application. On January 10th, 2024, the Commission issued an order scheduling hearings, establishing discovery guidelines, and requiring customer notice. The order scheduled 2 public witness hearings as well as an expert witness hearing to begin on this date and at this time. The intervention and participation of the public staff in this proceeding is recognized pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Section 62-15 sub D and Commission Rule R1-19 sub E. In addition, the Attorney General's Office has been allowed to intervene in this proceeding on behalf of the using and consuming public in accordance with North Carolina General Statute Section 62-20. On May 29th, 2024, an agreement and stipulation of settlement was filed in this docket on behalf of PSNC, EP Holdings, and the public staff. Also, on May 29th, 2024, the public staff filed the testimony of Michelle Boswell supporting the settlement agreement. On May 31st, 2024, the PSNC filed the supplemental testimony of D. Russell Harris in support of the settlement agreement, and EP Holdings filed the testimony of Laszlo Barsani in support of the settlement. On May 31st, 2024, EP Holdings filed a motion to excuse witness Herodance's appearance at the expert witness hearing, and on June 6th, filed a motion to excuse witness Reed's appearance at the expert witness hearing. The Commission subsequently issued orders excusing both witnesses Herodance and Reed from appearing at the hearing today. All right, that brings us to today. I call upon counsel for the parties to announce their appearances for the record. We'll begin with the applicants.
Chair Mitchell, members of the Commission, I'm Sam Irvin IV of counsel with Brooks Pierce. With me are Marcus Trathan and Amanda Hawkins, also with Brooks Pierce. We appear on behalf of the applicant, Enbridge Parrot Holdings.
Good morning, Mr. Irvin.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell, members of the Commission. I'm Mary Lynn Grigg with the law firm of McGuire Woods, appearing on behalf of PSNC.
Good morning, Ms. Grigg.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioner. I am Will Freeman, and with me is Gina Holt with public staff. Using it.
Good morning, Mr. Freeman.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Derek Mertz. I'm here on behalf of the State Attorney General's Office.
Good morning, Mr. Mertz. All right. Are there preliminary matters that we need to take up before we begin this morning?
No.
Okay. It's my understanding that you all have settled upon an order of witnesses and that EP Holdings and PSNC will put up a panel of witnesses to begin.
Yes.
All right, you all may call your witnesses then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. EP Holdings would call Laszlo Varsani, James Sanders, and Christopher Johnston.
And PSNC will call Mr. Rusty Harris.
All right, good morning, gentlemen. Let's get you sworn in. Can you all place left hands on the Bible, raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, you all may proceed.
Okay, so let me proceed with the EP Holdings witnesses. Let me take you one at a time if I could. Mr. Varsani, please state your name and official address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Laszlo Varsányi, and I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Integration and Value Creation for Enbridge Gas, Inc.
Did you cause to be filed in this proceeding settlement testimony consisting of 15 pages and 4 exhibits?
Yes,
Do you have any corrections to that testimony?
I do have one. It's a correction with respect to page 4, line 19 of my testimony. The word indirect there should read direct.
As corrected, if I asked you the same questions in these pre-filed submissions, the pre-filed submission today, would your answers be the same?
Yes,
And did you cause to be filed in this proceeding a summary of your testimony?
I did.
Is that summary true and accurate to the best of your information and belief?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sanders, let me turn to you. Please state your name and official address for the record.
I'm Jim Sanders. I'm the Senior Vice President of Enterprise and Utility Integration. My business address is 500 Consumers Road, Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Did you cause to be filed in this proceeding direct testimony consisting of 17 pages and 1 exhibit?
I did.
And do you have any corrections to your testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the questions in the pre-filed submission today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
And did you cause to be filed in this proceeding a summary of your testimony?
I did.
Is that summary accurate to the best of your information and belief?
Yes.
Mr. Johnston, if I could turn to you, please state your name and official address for the record.
Chris Johnston, Vice President, Finance Integration, Enbridge Inc., 425 First Street, Southwest Calgary, Canada.
And did you cause to be filed in this proceeding direct testimony consisting of 10 pages and 1 exhibit?
Yes,
Do you have any corrections to your testimony?
I do.
Okay, could you walk through those with us?
Certainly. The responses are accurate when made, but due to the passage of time, there have been a few developments that would alter my responses. There are 3. First, on page 4, lines 9 through 12, and at line 20, I reference a $9.4 billion bridge facility created to finance the transaction. However, since the filing of my testimony, Enbridge has successfully raised funds for the transaction through other means of financing, so the bridge facility no longer exists. Second,
Mr. Johnston, could
Sure.
you pull the microphone just a little closer so the commissioners can?
Second, in the table on page 6, Moody's senior unsecured rating should be changed to Baa2, and the Moody's outlook should be changed to stable. Third, on pages 8 through 9 of my testimony, I reference various commitments proposed in the joint application. These commitments, of course, have been updated in the regulatory conditions agreed to with the public staff.
So, Mr. Johnston, as clarified and corrected, if I asked you the questions in these pre-filed submissions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes,
And did you cause to be filed in this proceeding a summary of your testimony?
yes,
Is the summary true and accurate to the best of your information and belief?
it is.
Okay, thank you.
Good
I
morning.
guess, if now's appropriate time, I'd also ask that the testimony be entered into the record.
All right, the testimonies of Mr. Christopher Johnson is filed on November 15th, 2023, consisting of 10 pages and one exhibit corrected from the stand today shall be copied into the record as if delivered orally from the stand. Testimony of James Sanders filed on November 15th, 2023, consisting of 17 pages and one exhibit shall be copied into the record as if delivered orally from the stand. Testimony of Mr. Laszlo Varsani as filed on May 31st, 2024, consisting of 15 pages and 4 exhibits, portions of which are confidential, shall be copied into the record as if delivered orally from the stand. Exhibits to those testimonies will be marked for identification as they were when pre-filed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also ask that the pre-filed summaries of their respective pre-filed testimony be entered into the record.
Pre-filed summaries of that testimony will be copied into the record at the appropriate time.
Good morning, Mr. Harris.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name and business address for the record?
Yeah, D. Russell Harris, and my business address is 800 Gaston Road, Gastonia, North Carolina.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
PSNC Energy, a subsidiary of Dominion Energy.
Did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on November 15th, 2023, 11 pages of direct testimony and question and answer form?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your direct testimony?
I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Harris, did you also cause to be pre-filed in this docket on May 31st, 2024, 6 pages of supplemental testimony and question and answer form?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your supplemental testimony?
No changes.
And if I were to ask you those questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, at this time, I would request that the direct and supplemental testimonies of Mr. Harris be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
All right, the direct testimony of D. Russell Harris filed in this docket on November 23rd, 2023, consisting of 11 pages, will be copied into the record as if delivered orally from the stand. The supplemental testimony of D. Russell Harris filed in this docket on May 31st, 2024, will be consisting of 6 pages, will be copied into the record as if delivered orally from the stand.
Thank you. Did you also pre-file a summary of your direct and supplemental testimony?
I did.
Thank you. And we also request that that be copied into the record at the appropriate time.
All right, the testimony summaries for Mr. Harris's testimonies will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell.
Witnesses available for cross-examination.
All right, thank you, counsel. My notes indicate we have cross-examination from the Attorney General's office.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Derek Mertz. I'm with the State Attorney General's office. My questions primarily relate to the settlement testimony that was filed and the settlement that was filed. So I'll direct my questions to Mr. Varsani and Mr. Harris. But if any of you think that you may be the more appropriate person to address a particular question or wish to expound upon an answer, please do so. I'd like to draw your attention to Section 15 of the settlement. And we'll start with 15(1)(a). Please let me know when you've gotten that. So I understand from the testimony of the companies that many of the benefits of the purchase for ratepayers are considered as sort of the unquantifiable. And the reason that is due in large part to the fact that you—
Mr. Mertz, make sure you're in the mic, please.
Sorry. And the reason for that is because essentially the allegation is that one well-run company is purchasing and will be running a previously well-run company. The most immediate direct benefit to current customers appears to be in the way of bill credits, which are set out in Section 15.1. I just would like to clarify what those credits are. So to clarify, the credits to all customers will total $4 million, and that will be $1 million a year from each January bill from 2024 to 2028. So for the next 4 years, that those bill credits will be reflected. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And while the actual credit per customer will vary depending on customer usage, the average bill credit works out to essentially $1.50 per customer each year for the next 4. Is that correct?
I've not done that math, but that seems in the ballpark, yes.
Okay. So essentially the math I performed was dividing 4 million by the roughly 660,000 customers that are currently customers of the company. The additional credit to qualifying low-income customers will total approximately $1 million for the winter of 2024 only. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And to clarify, this credit is not calculated by usage, but is essentially per customer. So any eligible customer will receive the same bill credit.
Well, that's it's going to be done for all eligible customers up to about $30 per month over the period of the 5 winter months. And it is not based on usage, so I think that's correct.
Okay. And I'll use an example. So what that means is if the total amount that would be allowed is $100 to each customer. This is just a hypothetical, $100. Then for the next 5 months, each eligible customer will receive not for the next 5 months, but for the winter months of 2024 and 2025, each eligible customer would receive up to $20 per month for each of those 5 months. If the hypothetical total amount was $100.
Yes, I see how you're doing that math. I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly how the public staff and PSNC would choose to administer the refund, but if there's $100 owable or eligible and you spread it over the 5 months, then your math is correct.
Okay. I'd like to turn to section 15.2. And so the way I read section 15.2a is that everyone expects that the company will be filing a rate case in 2025, but there's not actually a moratorium set out by this particular section saying that it will be to 2025. It's just an expectation that that's when the next rate case will be. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What 15.2a seems to provide is a potential moratorium to January 1st, 2028 on the condition that the public staff and PSNC agree and support in that 2025 rate case the establishment of a cost recovery rider for the costs of 3 separately named capital projects. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the parties propose that the cost recovery rider will be administered similarly to the integrity management tracker that's already in place.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that it will necessarily be filed at the exact same time as the IMT, correct? The time for filing will be determined in the 2025 rate case.
That's correct.
Okay. And to be clear, if approved, the anticipated cost recovery rider application will be filed in 2026, 2027, 2028 until the subsequent rate case, which would be expected to be in 2028.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the cost recovery rider, there's use of the language in that particular provision noting adjustment for depreciation. That term depreciation in the settlement is referring only to those 3 separately named capital projects. Is that correct? It doesn't mean like that the company will be recalculating depreciation for all its capital assets.
That's correct.
Okay. Am I correct that the M71 and the Mariah Energy Center are currently scheduled to be completed and placed in service in late and early 2027 respectively?
I can speak to that. The M71 project, actually, we would expect to be completed by the end of 2025. The Mariah Energy Center project, you're correct, would be estimated to be completed in the first part of 2027.
Okay, so for the MEC, the expectation would be that that would not be eligible for capital recovery until after it's placed into service in 2027.
Correct.
Okay. And so essentially a year that particular project would only be included in the cost recovery rider for roughly 1 year until the next rate case. If it makes it into the, say, 2027 rider.
Right, yeah, but based on these dates projected, that'd be correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Turning to 15.2B1. I'm going to summarize this provision. This is essentially an agreement to normalize O&M expenses using older actuals in the next rate case, in the 2025 rate case. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Is there a particular reason why those years were chosen? Are they more or less, or do they better reflect, what the company would expect the O&M expenses would be in a typical rate case?
I would describe this as being one of the perhaps underappreciated benefits of the stipulation to the customer, in that our estimation is that the more recent 2024 actuals will be higher than either the average of the 22-23 period or the 2023 actuals.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I had on 15.2B. If you would turn to 15.2C. So as I read this particular provision, PSNC is to propose in the next rate case, in the 2025 rate case, a customer assistance program, a CAP. And the agreement here that's set out is that if approved by the commission in that rate case, that the company would contribute funding to the cap of up to $300,000 per year for a maximum of 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. When the company says up to $300,000, that's not the company saying, well, we may choose to propose a cap with $100,000. We may choose to propose a cap that doesn't run for the full 3 years when it uses maximum. What the company is saying is, we are pledging as part of this settlement agreement to provide that up to $300,000 or the cost of the cap. So the up to is really reflecting that the customer assistance program may be less than $300,000. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
But what the company is agreeing with the public staff is, we will fully fund the cap. And if it's more than $300,000, we will fund the cap up to $300,000.
That's correct.
And when you use the maximum of 3 years, what you're not saying we may choose to only do this for 1 year. We may choose to only do this for 2 years. What you're saying is, we're doing this for 3 years unless, some unforeseeable situation where maybe there's another rate case in this time, or, there may be a reason why you don't get to that 2-year point before there's another rate case. Is that what that language is supposed to reflect?
Yeah, the language really is there to reflect the fact that the CAP will ultimately be subject to the approval of the commission, and we're not able to know with certainty what the commission will approve. But if the commission approves a CAP that has a duration of at least 3 years and a cost of at least $300,000, the company's expectation and commitment is that we would fund for that 3-year period and the full $300,000.
Okay. Is that 3 years sort of a hard line, or is it essentially whatever is determined in the 2025 rate case for funding purposes would be until the next rate case? Meaning, so if the company decided in 2028 not to file a rate case, would it be funding that cap from the 2025 rate case to, say, the 2029 rate case, the 2030 rate case, whenever it would choose to come back in? Or is it that particular benefit would disappear at the 3-year point, regardless of what would happen in the future rate cases?
The commitment is for the 3 years. And the thought behind it is that Enbridge is looking to help kickstart a new program. And that's really what the funds are intended to do. And that by the time that the 4th year comes around, that the program would be, to the extent that it's approved by the commission, fully funded by other customers.
Thank you. Okay, so to summarize these 3 particular portions of 15.2, all of these particular benefits are agreements to future actions between the stipulating parties. They're not necessarily actions that will be taken by the commission. Obviously, there'll be proposals in the next rate case, but the agreements are just between the parties. So is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And so the company isn't necessarily agreeing to subject itself to the regulatory conditions in the code of conduct in this proceeding only on the condition that the commission approves a cost recovery rider in 2025. It's agreeing to subject itself to those particular conditions on the condition that the public staff put forth that proposal and agree to that proposal in the 2025 rate case. So it's not contingent on commission approval.
Which one specifically are you asking that for?
For purposes of, say, the regulatory conditions and the other aspects of the settlement, the company isn't saying we are only agreeing to these regulatory conditions. We're only agreeing to this regulatory structure if we get particular action in the 2025 rate case.
Absolutely not.
Okay. And the parties are not deciding in this proceeding those proposed 2025 rate case issues. So that the commission doesn't have to rule upon whether it's intending to grant the cost recovery rider in this proceeding.
No, sir.
Those are my questions.
All right, just confirming public staff has no cross for the witnesses.
Thank you, no cross.
Okay, redirect.
No redirect from EP Holdings.
All right, let's see if there are questions from the commissioners. Questions? Commissioner McKissick, go ahead.
And this was just one question, I guess, it's Mr. Persante. It wasn't clear to me when you were discussing section 15.1B in terms of the low-income customer 2025 bill credits. It talked about an amount not to exceed $30 per month, but it wasn't clear to me how that amount would actually be computed in terms of what that credit might potentially be for eligible customers that were SIP or Psyche eligible. So I was just seeking some clarification because it wasn't clear to me how that was going to be computed.
Yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Ultimately, this will be something that we will work with public staff to administer the program, and that one is subject to the future approval by the commission. And so I don't think we sit here today with a hard and fast idea on how to administer it. The idea behind it was that $30 per month would be a meaningful support for those that are eligible for the program, and that it would be administered during the 5 winter months. But beyond that, I think we're fairly agnostic and open-minded as to how to administer that.
Thank you. That was the only question I had. I think the other responses to Mr. Mertz were pretty clear and direct. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes, can any of you briefly comment on your program to reduce emissions intensity versus Dominion's approach, PSNC's approach versus the Enbridge approach? What kind of changes can we expect?
Yes, Mr. Sanders will start, and Mr. Harris may choose to supplement.
Yes, thanks for the question, Commissioner. I can't really speak to the difference. I'm not that familiar with Dominion's program, but at Enbridge, for the distribution side of the business and for the broader corporations, our targets are to be on an operating basis net neutral by 2050 and have a 35% reduction in emissions by 2030. Those would include things that would be using around natural gas usage in the company, and this would incorporate all operating assets and ancillary assets, so fleet, buildings, and the pipelines themselves. We're also looking at methane emissions from the pipelines as part of that equation. Probably the largest contributor we have is on compression. So looking at our compressors and how do we modify them to reduce emissions. So that's the fundamental components of our program.
Could you just give a little bit more specifics about when you say modify? And I mean, are these things that you already have in plans that you've already been doing, or?
Well, I'll say a little bit of all of the above. If I think about compression, one of the more interesting aspects we're looking at right now is when we're talking to some of the compressor operators around hydrogen blending and compression, for example. On the pipeline systems themselves, it's largely looking at leakage, fugitive emissions, and how do we reduce those. Typically, that is around looking at the older assets, the more leaky assets, and replacing those is a big part of it. I understand in Dominion and a number of the companies looked at, those programs are already in place and operating. And then some of the fugitive emissions around our meter sets, and this is around threaded fittings and looking at where we can reduce those. So those are some examples of how we tackle the overall emissions.
Yeah, thank you. No further questions.
All right, Commissioner Tucker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a segue into what Commissioner Hughes asked about, I'd read in Canada where you were already doing hydrogen blending. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What percentage have you attained in those operations of hydrogen blending?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Right now, it's in a community called Markham, Ontario. We've isolated about 3,600 customers where we're blending hydrogen into the gas stream. Right now, we're blending up to 2% in the gas stream, and we're working towards a 5%, and that's coming shortly. I'm anticipating that, and we're also looking at expanding to a much larger number of customers, probably about triple that number of customers in the near term. So we're doing it cautiously. We want to make sure we understand the systems, the processes, and the risks around those before we go widespread.
Okay, so what would be your projected goal over the next 10 years with hydrogen?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't think there's an easy answer to that one. There's different opinions, and I'll say there's technical experts way beyond my knowledge that would give you different answers. But I know right now in the industry, one of the targets I've seen across North America and in Europe as well, 20% seems like a reasonable number that we could get up to.
Okay, thank you, sir. Back to the acquisition, and any of you gentlemen can answer the question of, in any M&A, there are always economies of scale and proposed savings by the company doing the purchasing. Can you tell me what those numbers look like to you in your calculations, and would those savings offset a radical rate increase perhaps in the rate case in 25, or is there enough to do so?
Well, Commissioner, this acquisition is a little unique in that there's not an overlap between our service territory and the service territory of PSNC. We've historically done acquisitions that, just as you described, that were synergy acquisitions, adjacent or abutting territories. We had a large transaction that did have those types of synergies associated with it. This one is a little unique, and maybe Mr. Sanders, you'd like to supplement.
Sure. I'll just add to Mr. Varsani's answer that in this acquisition and in the process we're going through right now, we have not assigned any synergies through this process. We've looked at these companies as Mr. Varsani talked about, as fairly independent operating as they are today. The operations, when you compare the shared services functions from the corporate offices and the utility shared services and the operations themselves, largely will be in parallel what we're doing in the future. So we have not sat down and said there is a specific synergy target around any of these assets or any of these operations at this point.
Mr. Sanders, as Mr. Sorry, forgive me, I'm from south of Raleigh. You guys are from north of Raleigh. In Ohio and Utah, those are not in your same territories, and you found no economies of scale with those two acquisitions that would match what PSNC is you're purchasing here?
No, again, we've not found any synergies or not assigned any to those acquisitions.
So it's just flat,
It is.
dollar for dollar, trade for trade. Okay. Okay. The other thing, and I guess Mr. Johnston could answer this one. Moody's has got you at a Baa2. Is that what you said?
That's
I think in the reading it was a 3. That rating is okay, but not great. What's the reasoning for that?
So they downgraded us at the end of March from Baa2 down to Baa2. It's still solid investment grade. The downgrade, they had us on negative watch for some time, and then at the end of March, they had their action to move us down to Baa2 on the senior secured rating. No change to the short-term rating. And in this case, it's a function of them, I would say, changing the goalpost in terms of the measure they choose to use to assess our credit capacity, credit quality. In this case, they added a new coverage ratio. Dividend coverage ratio is one of their metrics. And using their calculation, they use depreciation as a cash expense. I don't agree with treating depreciation as a cash expense, but they are entitled to their own independent views. And as a result of them using their calculation, using depreciation as a cash outflow, it has us below 1 times. Using our calculation, we're at 1.4 times. So at Enbridge, we weren't in a position to cut our dividend to that magnitude to address that rating action. So we've accepted that Baa2 over time. As our cash flow grows and our dividend grows at a slower pace, we will naturally cure that. But the Baa2 is the rating. The 2 other rating agencies have us a solid BBB plus investment grade.
Okay. So you feel pretty confident that you're in a very stable position. I see your revenue's at 39 billion. I didn't devil it, but your stock's trading at about $36 a share. How does that compare with the rest of the industry?
I would say our share price performance has been pretty strong over the short period. We've been raising a lot of equity. I mean, we just filed our at the market offering to prospectus supplements to raise some additional equity up to a maximum.
Is that the 4.5 billion?
No, this is an additional one that we just filed, I guess, maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
It's really the last piece of our financing sort of initiative to manage this transaction in a credit-friendly manner. And the purpose of that is to maintain an appropriate debt to EBITDA in a range of 4.5 to 5 times to ensure the credit rating is very important to us. So the additional equity we've been raising has been very credit positive.
Well, throughout the testimonies and the positive comments about the acquisition, it talks about your financial strength, and then you get this rating. I just needed to ask to understand that you had the wherewithal to continue on with uninterrupted service to the people that are there. I guess I'll ask this question, Mr. Harris. You're VP of Operations and Management for PSNC. Do you intend to keep your job?
I do.
Okay. Did I read somewhere that you plan to keep the leadership executive positions in place for a period of 24 months?
Mr. Sanders, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I can answer that. That is correct. And we intend to keep local management, local leadership in place in PSNC.
So there's no concern about a big employment hole as far as a vacuum for moving the corporate offices out of Gastonia into Canada and impacting Gastonia at all, right? You guys are going to stay down south and come down and enjoy the warm weather in the fall when it's about 20 below in Canada. Okay, let me see, one other thing.
Commissioner, based on the weather this morning, yes.
Okay, just one quick question again. I don't know if I'm quick or not. Madam Chair can stop me. The M71 and the T15 that you talked about, the plants, first of all, this dovetails back into what Mr. Sanders said about, doing what you can to eliminate emissions and carbon and methane into the air. Do you, in any of your other plants using natural gas, and use liquid molecules or A9 to scrub the air prior to it being released in the atmosphere? Are you doing that now? I know it's expensive. The technology is available. It creates a lot of maintenance and those kind of things. But of course, we're in this carbon world. Are you doing that anywhere else? And do you plan to do that at M71 or T15 at all?
Well, M71 is strictly a pipeline project.
Right.
So there are no emissions from any.
Except for leaks in the pipeline, perhaps. Okay, I got you.
Correct. On T15, it's a combination of a pipeline project and compression project, and we are installing pollution control equipment on the exhaust of the compressors planned for that project.
Okay, and my final question, Mr. Harris, that Transco, you're in Transco Zone 5, is that correct?
That's correct.
You, we had Winter Storm Elliott. There was an interruption through PJM in gas service to the Carolinas. It probably went up north somewhere, I suspect. And, do you feel comfortable about working with Williams and Transco did you have any interruptions in gas supply during that period of time? And what kind of relationship do you have with them as to not have them shortchange you should an adverse climate event happen?
Right. So we didn't have any interruptions during that event. We did see lower pressures on the Transco pipeline than we had historically seen. And we were able to adjust our plan for that day such that we avoided any interruptions of firm customers. We did curtail our interruptible industrial customers during that event, but that's not an unusual act. A couple of takeaways from that event. One, it reinforced for me the significant need for this Mariah Energy Center facility that we're constructing in Person County, because having a large source of dispatchable gas that's directly connected to our system, I think there are some significant reliability advantages to that.
Mhm.
Having said all that, we do have a good relationship with Transco. I felt like that there were certainly lessons learned from the event in 2022, and we saw much better communications. For instance, with Transco, they've changed some of their practices on how they manage the system during those events. So I do feel much better about, that relationship and how we would interact with them during a cold weather event like that.
Okay, and Mr. Sanders and Mr. Harris can answer this. If that event were to occur again and you would lose pressure, does Enbridge plan to invest, or do you think that PSNC has adequate backup to be able to serve its customers without interruption?
I believe we do, because of the plans that we have to construct this LNG plant. It'll be our second LNG plant on our system, and that will position us well. Longer term, more help is on the way. The MVP pipeline is about to go into service. I think that's going to help Transco's Zone 5 pressures quite a bit. So that will provide some support. And even longer term than that, the MVP Southgate project, if it were to be completed, would provide us a second source of interstate pipeline capacity to our system in North Carolina.
Commissioner, maybe I'll just add that, of course, Enbridge would support the input from PSNC and Enbridge Gas North Carolina's requirements. So this is where our commitment is about safe, reliable, affordable supply energy, and our financial capability to support any requirements that come from PSNC.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
All right, I have just a few questions for you all. I'll pick up some where Commissioner Tucker took you, but for those of you from the Enbridge company, you may know that PSNC has a history of participating in rate cases at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that involve Transco as one example. They're in there trying to get the best deal they can for their customers. Do you all intend to continue that tradition of participating in litigation when necessary to ensure that your customers are going to get the best deal from Transco?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We're obviously very incented to get the best deal, and we'll look to get direction from the local experts on that. And I see no reason that we would be looking to modify historical practice. Our approach to all of the overarching transaction is, if something's not broken, we certainly don't want to come in and fix it or make changes for the sake of making changes. And for those types of practices where we can add value, on behalf of the customer, we will certainly look to do that.
Okay, thank you for that response. Commissioner Tucker asked you about your intentions with respect to leadership at the local level, and I heard your testimony today and was happy to hear your testimony today. One question I have for you all, the application includes one word that is then not included in subsequent filings that you all have made in this docket. And let me get to the application and tell you exactly which page I'm talking about. All right. On page 16 of the application, we're looking at, it's paragraph 36, sub C. And I will read it. It says, after the transaction and absent a material change in circumstances, PSNC will continue to maintain its operation centers and its local headquarters in Gastonia, North Carolina, and its day-to-day operations will continue to be locally managed by the existing seasoned team of executives. And then when you look at the reg conditions that were filed as part of the settlement, I'm specifically looking at section 1013, that existing has gone away. So you have after the closing of the transaction, blah, 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 to be the day-to-day operations will continue to be locally managed by a seasoned team of executives. So we lose existing. I did some research on the, I read the order that was issued in Ohio, and the language in the settlement agreement tracks the language that you all entered into in the case in Ohio. So my guess is there's just some, you all were able to utilize the same agreement sort of jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But I just want to make sure that you all have plans to keep existing leadership in place down here in North Carolina.
We do.
Okay. And I will tell you, PSNC has been a historically very well-run company, has a strong relationship with the public staff and with its regulator. And much of that is a reflection of leadership of the organization. So it's hence the reason for my question. There was something else I was going to say there. Mr. Harris's testimony points out, I can't remember if it was his supplemental or his direct, that since for a number of years now, and Mr. Harris, you can fill in here where I'm missing the date, that there has been no formal complaint to this commission relating to service quality provided by PSNC. That's of significance to this body. So I just want to make sure. Again, hence the reason for my previous question. Mr. Harris, how many years has it been?
Several.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Well,
the exact,
all right, I'll tell
but
you.
It's,
I'll pull the
it's a
testimony.
number, pretty lengthy period.
I'm giving you a chance giving you a chance here to, all right. 2009. So that's many, many years. You probably had more hair back then, Mr. Harris. But, all right.
No comment.
So, all right. We've heard, you've taken some questions today from commissioners about challenges that y'all are going to have to that PSNC has been navigating here in North Carolina. And assuming the transaction is approved and closes, y'all will have to sort of pick up the ball and run with it, as they say. Again, do you see, what do you all see as your biggest challenge here in North Carolina? Based on what you know so far.
Well, what I know so far, Madam Chair, is the biggest challenge is going to be moving the systems and processes that are embedded today within Dominion environment. So in any type of transaction like this, and I'm old enough to remember the days we didn't have all the technology, and somehow this technology has been one of our biggest challenges. I'm very confident in our collaboration with Dominion and our coordination with them about defining what the requirements are. Much of this is being defined today in our transition services agreement, with the goal being very specific about ensuring we have continuity of service, quality of service is maintained. We're very focused on that. So our transition services agreement is out to 24 months post the close with PSNC. And then, of course, looking at how do we maintain those after that, so where we're moving it to. We've begun that work. It is not simple. There's a lot. There was over 300 services that we've defined. And we would certainly be engaging the local organization, local leadership to assist in that at Shortland.
Okay. Thank you for that response. Am I correct that, so in the acquisition, in Enbridge's acquisition of these three LDCs, one of which was located in Utah, the other is Ohio, and now we're PSNC, which is obviously here in North Carolina. PSNC is the smallest in terms of customer count.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I mean, each of the other two are about 1 million customers, and down here you're at about 600,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay? Just want to make sure my understanding was correct. Do you foresee any challenges or opportunities given that PSNC is so much smaller than the other two companies that you have are working towards acquiring?
No, I would not take any different approach based on the customer count.
Okay. Your testimony about integration of the companies is understood, and we've been through, this commission has been through many merger proceedings, and so understands the challenges and complexities that arise there as companies attempt to do the work of integrating. There is testimony in this proceeding about an IMS. Can one of you all just help me understand exactly what the IMS is?
I can tell that, Commissioner, Madam Chair. So it's an integrated management system, and it's meant to match the requirements of the various jurisdictions that we work in. It could be federal, provincial, state, or federal in the U.S. and our ongoing operating programs to ensure that we meet the compliance of those requirements within the jurisdiction. So a good example might be the health and safety requirements in a particular jurisdictions. Our health and safety programs are mapped out and defined in a way that we can ensure that we have compliance and meeting all the requirements. I think we're up to now 10 different programs that we've defined in that management system. I believe my original testimony, we've committed to 2 years to get that in place. The good news, again, when I look at each of these companies, and Madam Chair, you've already said it, this is a well-run organization. And so we'll be largely mapping what the requirements will be in North Carolina and ensuring that we have a mechanism to have transparency to compliance and meeting those requirements.
Okay. It doesn't sound like to me that the IMS involves accounting software. Is that correct?
It's not intended around the financials.
Okay, so will you all rely on the software, the software programs that Dominion PSNC is currently using, or what's the plan in terms of accounting programs?
Well, I could start it. I'm sure Mr. Johnson can add to it, but from an accounting standpoint, during the transition services agreement timeframe, the 24 months, we'll be relying on Dominion's systems to continue that continuity. While that's going on, we'll be working on the replacement for that from an Enbridge perspective, using our corporate software for the financial.
Yeah, that's right, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Recent experience shows the commission that can be a complicated process, especially when you're timing it with rate cases and other proceedings before the commission where you're coming in asking for cost recovery. So we would ask that you be cognizant of that and work closely with the public staff to ensure that when that transition does occur, that it's occurring with all of these things in mind. You mentioned the transition services agreement. In this case, as I understand it, you all have asked for the commission's approval to operate under an interim basis under the master TSI, the ISA, which I understand is an intercorporate services agreement, and then the intercompany loan facility, which you all are calling it the SDL, the subordinated demand loan. I think that's what SDL stands for.
That's correct.
And then the section 15, back to section 15 of the settlement, of the reg conditions on the settlement agreement. 15.5 indicates that upon consummation or closing of the transaction, PSNC would operate under interim authority subject to final approval by the commission. What is the plan for seeking that final approval by the commission?
Yes, The objective of having the interim approval is to just make sure that we can provide the continuity and the reliable service. But we recognize that the commission will need to approve the final documents, and so we would be working with public staff to finalize that and bring that forward for the commission's approval.
Okay, so just want to make sure I've understood you correctly. Subsequent to closing, you all would then work with the public staff in their review and understanding of those agreements, and then the public staff and the company would ultimately bring those agreements to the commission with a recommendation for action?
That's exactly right.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see. There is a reporting obligation in the reg conditions related to affiliate transactions. And as I understand the condition, it requires PSNC to conduct an internal audit and then report to the commission concerning those affiliate transactions. And the audit is to occur, that internal audit is to occur every other year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the section 4.9 is titled biannual review, and I'm wondering if it means biennial. I just wanted to make sure y'all meant every other year and not twice a year. That may be something y'all just want to review. I see, Mr. Harris, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming that means yes, you mean every other year.
We do mean every
Okay,
other.
okay, that's, just wanted to confirm that. All right, my understanding of the O&M provision of the settlement agreement, which we've had testimony today from Mr. Varshani about that section and the likely benefit that will accrue to customers. As I understand that provision, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, you all will use the low, in your next rate case, when establishing cost of service, you all will use the lower of the 2022 or the 2022-23 period O&M costs. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And Mr. Varshani, you indicated that that's likely to be a benefit to customers because 2024 is probably going to be will be a greater level of O&M expense. Is that
Almost
right?
certainly, given a period of high inflation.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So certainly while we support, keeping costs down for customers, want to make sure that that doesn't come at the expense of other reductions in service or cuts by the company. And so here's my question for you all. PSNC has, staffing that's adequate to cover its operations here and its obligations here in North Carolina, particularly on the safety side and sort of the integrity of its system. Those technical folks that are out there making sure the pipe in the ground is safe and providing the safe and reliable service. Want to make, and PSNC also provides testimony in this case about its capital expenditure plan that's aimed at ensuring the integrity of its system. Want to make sure that there won't be any pressure to make cuts there, either on the people side or on the investment side, because we're agreeing to reduce O&M.
Maybe Mr. Sanders can start, and then Mr. Harris, you may choose to supplement.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I can assure you again that, and as many have seen in the material, one of our core values is around safety. And when we say safety, we mean to employees, we mean to the public, we mean to our customers. And that includes all of the health and safety programs, but also the asset integrity programs to ensure that they're adequately maintained. Again, when we did our due diligence around these companies, what we saw for PSNC, again, extremely well run, and not to mention the record on safety as a whole. Absolutely, that is a priority for us, and we will continue to maintain all those programs adequately to sustain that.
Okay. Thank you for that testimony. Mr. Harris, did you want to add to that?
Would agree, and if we review those calls for that 2025 case, if we see something that in our minds is compromising our ability to do those things, then I think we would propose adjustments, to reflect that. So I'm confident that we will not let this particular aspect of the agreement impair our ability to serve our customers and serve them safely.
Okay, thank you for that testimony. Earlier when I mentioned the company's relationship with its regulators and with the public staff, Part of the regulatory staff is the pipeline safety section, and the company obviously has a solid working relationship with the pipeline safety team here at the commission, and that obviously has to continue going forward to ensure the integrity of its system. Okay, let's see. I'm getting close to the end here. Mr. Harris, your testimony, your direct testimony indicates that as of the end of December 2022, one of the ratings agencies, I think it was S&P, had you at negative outlook. Can you help me understand why that is and if that has since changed? Do you need me to point you to the testimony?
Yes, if you would, please.
Okay. It's in your direct. Look at page 5. And you can, the paragraph beginning at line 5 is what I'm referencing. I'll note the other two agencies had you at stable. I just am curious about S&P's negative outlook.
Madam Chair, maybe while Mr. Harris is looking, I'm not here to comment on Dominion. S&P, I can give some comment just on how S&P approaches its ratings, which is different than Fitch and Moody's. S&P looks at PSNC as a core subsidiary of the parent. And as a result, if there's an action at the parent, it does trickle down to the subsidiary, in this case being PSNC. So I believe the negative outlook was a function of the issue that Dominion required is maybe not the right word, but caused them to seek to sell these natural gas LDCs for cash proceeds to bolster their credit capacity and credit quality. So that's just my perspective from an Enbridge expert perspective, not from a Dominion, but that's how S&P operates.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. That's helpful information.
And I believe that is correct. I mean, at that time, that was at the initial beginning actually of the Dominion process to shore up some credit concerns, which led to this transaction, in fact. So I believe that is a correct answer, that was really the underlying cause of that negative outlook at the end of 2022.
Okay, thank you. The provision in the reg conditions about the special bankruptcy director, in my review of reg conditions, I think this is a new one. And I haven't been around here for that long. So this could have appeared before, but can y'all help me understand why that condition?
Yes, I can take a stab and others may choose to supplement. You're exactly correct. A new provision in the context of PSNC. It is a regulatory condition that did exist at one of the other utilities, and in particular, the one in the West. And the provision provides benefits under a singular circumstance, and that is in the event of a bankruptcy. But my understanding is that as public staff reviewed and did their due diligence and looked at all of the various jurisdictions, my perception was that there was a little bit of wanting to ensure that the best practices from all of the other jurisdictions was brought to North Carolina, and this was one of those.
Okay, so I'm not hearing, thank you for that explanation. I'm not hearing you say that this is a reflection of things to come for this company or otherwise reflects on PSNC's financial health or Enbridge's concerns about PSNC's financial health.
Not at all.
Okay. Okay, I think I have gotten to the end of my list. All right, I think I'm there. I would just express my appreciation for you all being here with us today and answering our questions. We place significant weight on the responses that you have given us and your stated plans for the future of this company, assuming you receive the approval of this commission and the transaction proceeds to closure. Again, thank you for your testimony today. Let me see if there are questions on commissioners' questions. I'm sorry, let me start here first. Questions on commissioners' questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. No questions.
Okay,
I have just a couple.
go ahead.
To follow up on Commissioner Hughes's question, I believe he was talking to Mr. Sanders and Mr. Harris. Have you identified any particular compressors on the PSNC system specifically, not necessarily Enbridge, but on PSNC that would be eligible for near-term replacement or upgrade due to emissions concerns?
No, we don't have any plans to replace any existing compressors outside of those that are scheduled to be replaced as part of our T15 project.
Right. I'm sorry. I should have clarified.
Right. Otherwise, from an emissions perspective, we've attempted to adopt best practices and we have projects to help install equipment to help reduce emissions at the existing compressors that we have, but no replacements.
Thank you. To follow up on Chair Mitchell's question, does being part of Enbridge, the Enbridge team of companies, put PSNC in a better or the same position to negotiate against Williams in FERC proceedings? I mean, does Enbridge bring something different to the table than PSNC already delivered?
I don't think it significantly changes at all, really, the position we would take or have at FERC proceedings around or negotiating leverage around the any kind of negotiations we might have with the Williams company. I mean, we have and will continue to try to get the best upstream supply arrangements we can for our customers in North Carolina.
Maybe I'll just add, and not knowing the details of negotiations or the arrangements with Williams today or Transco, but I'll certainly say the experience, the knowledge, the breadth of the broader Enbridge organization would be at the disposal of PSNC to consult and find information. So we're delivering 20% of the natural gas in North America, and we have the existing utilities. So we'll certainly be leveraging all that knowledge and experience.
Does Enbridge, the parent, or any of its other companies that it currently owns, do they have a relationship or experience with Transco in other jurisdictions?
I can't speak to that. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, questions over here?
No questions.
No questions.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, with that, you all may step down. Thank you for your testimony, and you're also excused.
Madam Chair, I've got a few housekeeping matters, if I could.
You may.
Would ask that the exhibits corresponding to each of the witnesses' testimony be entered into evidence.
All right, I've heard no objection to that motion, so it will be allowed.
And I have a few other documents that we need to get into evidence, if I could.
All right.
Witnesses Heritance and Mr. Reed both pre-filed direct testimony, and we had moved to exclude their participation from this proceeding, which motion was granted on June 6 and June 7. As provided for in the order granting the motion to excuse, I'd ask that the pre-filed testimony of Michelle Heritance, consisting of 18 pages, be copied into the record as evidence, be treated as if given orally from the stand, and also ask that her Exhibit 1 be admitted into evidence.
All right, the testimony of Michelle Heritance filed in this docket on November 15th, 2023, consisting of 18 pages, will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand. The one exhibit to that testimony will be marked for identification as it were when pre-filed, and it will also be admitted into the record.
Similarly, I'd ask that the pre-filed testimony of John Reed, consisting of 13 pages, be copied into the record as evidence, treated as if orally given from the stand, and that his 3 exhibits be admitted into evidence.
All right. The direct testimony of John Reed filed in this docket on November 15th, 2023, consisting of 13 pages, will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand. The 3 exhibits to his testimony will be marked for identification as they were when pre-filed, and they will be admitted into the record.
Thank you. Also, Madam Chair, if now is the appropriate time, I'd like to move admission of the joint application and the settlement stipulation.
All right, let's do that.
I would request that the joint application of Public Service Company of North Carolina and Enbridge Parrott Holdings LLC for authorizations to engage in a business combination transaction filed on October 2023, consisting of 21 pages and 4 appendices, be entered into the record.
That motion is allowed.
I would also request that the agreement and stipulation of settlement between PSNC, EP Holdings, and the public staff filed May 29, 2024, consisting of 7 pages and 1 exhibit, be entered into the record.
All right, that motion is allowed.
Thank you very much.
All right, public staff, may call your witness.
Thank you. The public staff calls Ms. Boswell.
Good morning, Ms. Boswell.
Good morning.
Seems like we were just here.
I'm working on my free ice cream cone.
All right. If you would, please, ma'am, raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Mr. Freeman?
Thank you, Chair. We have a summary of testimony that we thought we'd pass out. Does the chair want us to read that?
There's no need to read.
Thank you. Ms. Boswell, would you please state your name, business address, and position for the record?
Michelle Boswell. My business address is 430 North Salisbury Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm the Director of Accounting for the Public Staff.
Thank you. On May 29th, 2024, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket testimony consisting of 18 pages and also additionally including an Appendix A entitled Qualifications and Experience consisting of 2 pages?
I did.
And you did not file exhibits with your testimony, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would you give the same answers as set forth in your pre-filed testimony?
Yes.
Chair, I would at this time move respectfully and ask that the pre-filed testimony of Ms. Boswell, including Appendix A, be entered into evidence and copied into the record as if given orally from the stand here today.
All right. The testimony of Michelle Boswell filed in this docket on May 29th, 2024, consisting of 18 pages and 1 exhibit will be, consisting of 18 pages will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
In that case, I guess I'd move to mark Appendix A in the manner in which it was pre-filed.
All right. Let's see.
Sometimes those are treated as exhibits and sometimes as part of the testimony.
The appendix will come in with her testimony.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Ms. Boswell, we've handed out a summary of your testimony. Is that true? And is that a true and accurate and correct copy of a summary that if asked under oath, you would give?
It is.
We'll submit this to the record by filing it shortly after this hearing ends. But in the interim, we'd ask that it be entered into evidence and copied into the record as if given orally from the stand here
All right.
today.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. The testimony summary that Ms. Boswell has provided will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Ms. Boswell is now available for examination and commission questions.
All right, public staff. I'm sorry, AGO.
This should be short, Ms. Boswell. You heard my questions of the company's witnesses. Do those answers accurately reflect the public staff's understanding of the stipulation agreement?
Yes.
Do you wish to add anything to the answers you heard related to commission questions?
I would clarify that with the CAP program that's presented within the confines of our Section 15, that it was designed similar to the CAP program that was approved under the Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress rate cases. We set it up to be similar parameters as far as the overall impact on the bills. However, we set it up just for that winter period, whereas the Duke Carolinas and Progress run the entire year. And we did that under the assumption that most of the billings and the most impactful part of it would be those winter months.
And that particular CAP program, we won't actually see the proposal until the 2025 rate case.
Correct.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Redirect, Mr. Freeman.
No, no redirect, thank you.
Okay. My notes indicate that no questions. Okay, just for the record, making sure. All right, Ms. Boswell, questions from commissioners. Let me see if there are questions, commissioners. Questions down here. All right, Ms. Boswell, I have a few for you. The cost recovery rider that is part of the settlement agreement. Can you walk me through how that's just sort of step 1, step 2, step 3, how that's going to work?
Sure. So should the commission approve it within the confines of the 2025 rate case for which the Enbridge and Public Services indicated they intend to file, should the commission approve it, once each one of those items would come online and be in service and used and useful, it would be placed into the rider and depreciation would follow suit, much in the same way that the IMR and IMT riders currently exist.
Okay. At what point or does the public staff conduct its prudency review?
We would do that at the time that they would be placing that into the rider. So once it's placed into the rider, we would be doing the review to verify that it is indeed in service and the costs are prudently incurred and properly accounted for, in the same manner that we do with the integrity management as well.
Okay, so so then make sure I understand correctly. The public staff is going to complete its audit, its prudency review at the time the plant is in service or right about to be placed in service, such that when those costs are included in the rider for cost recovery from customers, public staff has completed its prudency review, and there is at least some agreement between the company and the public staff as to the prudence of those costs incurred.
Right, that is the plan. It may extend a little bit beyond when it actually goes into the rider to finalize all of that, because they would be placing it into the rider when it goes into service. And so that would have to actually be checked after the fact, after it's already gone into the rider technically. But in that time period, yes.
Okay. Okay, did the company and the public staff discuss prudence review in the context of the settlement negotiations?
In general, yes, we did.
Okay, and I assume that the public's, because, let me ask the question again. Because the IMR and IMT have been in effect for some time now, the public staff has the process down in terms of how it conducts its review and works with the company to access data and information it needs to complete its prudence review. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so you anticipate using that same process in the context of this cost recovery mechanism?
Very similar, yes. And we've also discussed with the company about providing us updates as the projects are going along so that we kind of know ahead of time where it is that they are, where their final date of in-service is projected to be, and any issues that they've encountered between those two.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Boswell. Did you hear my question to the applicants regarding the O&M provision in the settlement agreement? Let me ask you the same question. This commissioner supports benefits to customers and reducing costs where it's appropriate to do so. I don't want there to be a compromise in terms of investment necessary to comply with federal regulations or to otherwise ensure the safety of their system here in North Carolina compromised either in the terms of people losing jobs or investment not being made. Did you all have that discussion with the company in the context of reaching agreement on this O&M provision?
We did.
Okay. Anything else you want to say there?
And that is a large reason why the stipulation is structured the way it is before you today. We have agreed to propose the rider to handle the immediate larger impacts of those capital expenses such that the company won't have a delay in receiving the funding for those to pay those essentially off, for lack of a better term. And then we would also be looking at, within the confines of the O&M, we have set it as such that we think it's a reasonable level. All parties have agreed. However, if there's any outside issues that may arise, we would take those on a case-by-case basis in the rate case and define those accordingly.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Harris's testimony in this case identifies sort of general levels of anticipated expenditure, capital expenditure over the next several years. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Did you review, did you engage in any discovery with the companies or the applicants on those planned expenditures?
The public staff did, yes.
Okay. And are those planned expenditures, is there a connection between the planned expenditures identified in Mr. Harris's testimony and the amounts that you all anticipate being placed into that rider mechanism should the commission approve it?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the largest projects are what we would recommend to be in the rider that will be proposing, or the company will be proposing, and we will be recommending within the 2025 case.
Okay. Thank you. Did you hear my question about the 3 agreements under which the regulatory conditions would allow PSNC to operate with interim authority pending final approval by the commission?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So has the public staff had an opportunity to review those 3 agreements at this point in time?
We have reviewed the drafts that they have provided us, yes.
Okay. And so do you anticipate that, assuming this commission approves the transaction and that the transaction closes, you all would review those 3 agreements in detail and then bring those to the commission with a recommendation for action at some point in the future?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Do you, Ms. Boswell, did the public staff review the settlement agreements and/or final orders issued in the Utah and Ohio transactions in which Dominion sold or Enbridge acquired the two LDCs?
We did.
Okay. And are you comfortable, is the public staff comfortable that North Carolina customers are receiving commensurate benefits and protections in the agreement that you all have entered into with the applicants in this proceeding as those customers in Utah and Ohio?
We're happy with the agreement that we have put forth.
Okay. Anything, Ms. Boswell, are there any other issues or concerns of which the commission should be aware as it deliberates on this application?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Let me see if there are questions on commissioners' questions from this side of the room.
No questions.
Okay.
No questions, Chair.
Well, Mr. Wertz.
Just a couple.
Okay.
Apologies. Following up on Chair Mitchell's question, Ms. Boswell, and understanding that the CRR has not been proposed, it hasn't been proposed in this case and is going to be proposed. If there is disagreement about the prudency of certain costs, how does the public staff anticipate that disagreement will be resolved in the annual rider proceeding?
Yes, and we have discussed with the company that we would try to work any kind of issues out prior to, or come to an agreement prior to. But yes, anything would be handled within the confines of approval of the amount, if approved, that would be recovered within the confines of the rider.
Okay. And to expound on your answer to Chair Mitchell regarding her concern about inadequate O&M being recovered by the company, it sounded like to me that the company's giving up a little bit in O&M for sort of the certainty of additional CapEx recovery outside of an annual rate case or a general rate case. Is that correct?
The stipulation is a meeting of the minds, an agreement where all parties leave the room equally unhappy. So we are happy with the portions that we have gotten, and we believe the company is happy with the portions that they have received.
Understood. Thank you.
Or at least equally unhappy.
I always try to leave a little happier than the other party. But yes.
I like that approach. All right, let's see. Ms. Boswell, I think, public staff, do you have any questions?
I can't top that.
Okay, that's a good call, Mr. Freeman. All right, Ms. Boswell, you may step down and be excused. Thank you for your testimony this morning. All right. With that, I believe Ms. Boswell was our final witness. We make sure parties, council, anything else that we need to handle before we adjourn this morning.
Not from the AGO.
Nothing from the public staff. Thank you.
Okay.
Not from EP Holdings.
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. With that, we have come to the conclusion of our hearing this morning. We would ask that post-hearing filings be made no later than 30 days subsequent to the notice of the mailing of or notice of the availability of the transcript. Certainly get them in as soon as you can. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.